Dear students, welcome back to video number 2 of this story, Footprints Without Feet. In the previous class, in my video number 1 or in the first video, I have explained a small part from the story Footprints Without Feet. Today, I will explain the remaining part of the story Footprint Without Feet. So let's start. The name of the story. What is the name? Footprints Without Feet. Written by whom? H.G. Wells. Means Herbert George Wells. Clear? So let us have a quick review of the things we have discussed in video number 1 of this story. This story is about a scientist named Griffin. Griffin was a brilliant scientist, but he was a lawless person. So Griffin carried out experiment after experiment to make human body transparent or invisible. And at last, after carrying out many experiments, he came out with a formula. He came out with a rare drug or a rare medicine, which after swallowing, human body could become invisible. Alright? So we have seen Griffin who has misused the discovery of science, who has misused his power, becoming invisible, who has misused the discovery of science. His fiction, his stories, his novels are mainly based on science fiction. He is called the father of science fiction. So here you see he has misused the power, the discovery of science by discovering a formula and becoming invisible. Alright, so let's start this story. In my book, it's page number 28. in my book, it's page number 28. 3 questions are given. Till the 3 questions we have discussed. Now we'll start from the next. Now see what happens next. Eager to get away from the crowded London, he took a train to the village of Epping, where he booked 2 rooms at a local inn. Alright, so as he robbed a person of a theatrical show, he escaped from that show without being caught. Then, just to get away from that crowded London, just to make himself absent or make himself invisible, we can say, from that crowded London, he took a train to the village of Epping, where he booked 2 rooms at a local inn. What is the meaning of inn? I-double-N, inn? Inn means you can say guest house. Alright? Inn means you can say guest house. It is not a permanent house which you take for your temporary stay. He booked a room at a guest house in the village of Epping, where he wanted to stay alone and in solitude. The arrival of a stranger at an inn in winter was in any case an unusual event. A stranger of such uncommon appearance set all tongues wagging. Mrs. Hall, the landlord's wife, made every effort to be friendly, but Griffin had no desire to talk and told her, "My reason for coming to Epping is a desire for solitude. I do not wish to be disturbed in my works. Besides, an accident has affected my face." What happened here is arriving at the village of Epping, and when he moved to book 2 rooms at a local inn, his appearance was so strange and uncommon that it it made all the other people who were at the local inn discussing about him. They started discussing about Griffin for two reasons. First reason is his appearance. Alright. The second reason is it was midwinter. And coming of a stranger in such a time was something very uncommon, something very unusual. So that made all the other towns, that made all the other people who were staying at the local inn, it made all the other people discussing about themselves, about Griffin. The learners, Mrs. Hall, who was the owner, she started to be friendly with Griffin, but Griffin was just the opposite. He did not want to be friendly. He did not want to talk to Mrs. Hall. He said to Mrs. Hall that his main motive, his main intention of coming here is he wanted solitude. Means what? He wanted privacy. He wanted loneliness. He wanted to spend time alone. He do not want to talk to anybody or be busy. He just wanted to live alone. That is, he wanted privacy. Rather, Griffin said to Mrs. Hall that his uncommon appearance was because an accident had affected his face. So this is his condition. Well, satisfied that her guest was an eccentric scientist, and in view of the fact that he had paid her in advance, Mrs. Hall was prepared to excuse his strange habits and irritable temper, but the stolen money did not last long, and presently Griffin had to admit that he had no more ready cash. He pretended, however, that he was expecting a check to arrive at any moment. So, what happened next is Mrs. Hall, she was satisfied with her scientist. No doubt he was very eccentric. I mean, he was a kind of odd person, but still Mrs. Hall was satisfied with him because he had paid Mrs. Hall in advance. So she thought that she found money in advance. So she excused his temper. She excused his habits. But the stolen money, but the money which Mr. Griffin had robbed from that theatrical store did not last long. How could Griffin pay money in advance to Mrs. Hall? How? Because he had money. He had stolen that money from whom? From that theatrical company. So he robbed that very person. So he had money. He paid that in advance. But this stolen money did not last long. After some days, Mrs. Hall asked for money to Mr. Griffin again. His money, he did not have enough money at that time after paying the first advance. So he pretended that Mr. Griffin, that is Griffin the scientist, he pretended that he was expecting a check to arrive at any moment. He pretended that a check will come to him shortly and he will hand over cash or check to Griffin, but actually that was false. He was pretending that it was not true. Shortly afterwards, a curious episode occurred. Very early in the morning, a clergyman and his wife were awakened by noises in the study. Creeping downstairs, they heard the chink of money being taken from the clergyman's desk. What happened next is, after some time, a different kind of incident occurred. What was the incident? Early in the morning, a clergyman and his wife, they were awake by the noise in the study room. Now, who is a clergyman? Clergyman. C-L-E-R-G-Y-M-N. Clergyman means what? You can say priest or minister of a church. Minister of a church. Clergyman and his wife, they were awake by what? By the noise of by the noises in the study room. They moved downstairs just to know from where the sound was coming. After moving downwards, what did they see? They heard the chink of money being taken from the clergyman's desk. They heard the sound of money. They heard the chink of money, when a tinkling sound of money. They heard the sound of money that was being taken away from the clergyman's desk, from the clergyman's box. You know how? Without making any noise, and with a poker grasped firmly in his hand, the clergyman flung over the door. The clergyman flung open the door, surrender. What happened next is, without making any noise, the clergyman took a poker, means a metal rod, by which, what we say, in foreign countries during the time when the weather is too cold, bitterly cold, people used to sit in front of fire, and poker is a kind of metal rod by which the woods or the other things which are given in the fire, so that fire continues burning, those wood or other kind of thing are what to say, are moved. That is called a poker. It's a metal rod. So the clergyman, he caught a poker strongly in his hand, and he opened the door and said, "Surrender." Actually, the clergyman did not see anybody. He thought that somebody surely was present in the room, because he could hear the sound of money. So he opened the door holding a metal rod in his hand. He said, what did he say? "Surrender." Then to his amazement, he realized that the room appeared to be empty. He and his wife looked under the desk and behind the curtains, and even up the chimney. There wasn't any sign of anybody. Yet the desk had been opened and the housekeeping money was missing. What happened next is, to his amazement, to his shock, after opening the door, he could not see anybody. No one was there. He and his wife searched the entire room. They looked under the desk, behind the curtains, and even up the chimney, but they did not see anybody. They did not see anybody, but still the desk, the box in which the money was kept, was open, and the housekeeping money was missing. The money which are kept for the maintenance of that house was missing. Money was missing means what? Somebody probably had entered and robbed that money. But to their amazement, to their shock, to their surprise, the clergyman and his wife, they could not find anybody. Opening the door of that room. Extraordinary affair, the clergyman kept saying for the rest of the day, but it was not as extraordinary as the behavior of Mrs. Hall's furniture a little later that morning. The landlord and his wife were up very early and were surprised to see the scientist's door wide open. Usually, it was shut and locked, and he was furious if anyone entered his room. The opportunity seemed too good to be missed. They peeped round the door, saw nobody, and decided to investigate. The bedclothes were cold, showing that the scientist must have been up for some time. And stranger still, the clothes and bandages that he always were lying about the room. See what happened here? The clergyman, after he could not find anybody, what did he say? That it was an extraordinary affair. It was something strange, something special kind of thing. But that special thing did not last long. Something more special happened a little later that morning. What was the thing? The furniture that were there in that room, the behavior of that furniture were different. What does this mean? It means that Griffin being invisible, he was present in that room. Nobody could see him, he was invisible, and he was doing such kind of strange things. But as the clergyman and his wife, they could not see him, they thought that the furniture's behavior changed. The next, in the morning what happened is, the landlord and his wife, they woke up early. They were surprised to see that the room in which Griffin stayed, the door of that room was open. Usually it was shut and locked. Griffin become angry if anyone entered his room without permission. But the landlord and his wife, they looked inside the room, they peeped inside the room, and they saw nobody. As they did not see anyone, they thought not to miss this opportunity. They thought it is the perfect time, perfect situation, perfect moment to check the room. They entered the room. The bedclothes were good, which shows that the scientist must have been up. The scientist must woke up before some time, and the clothes, the bandages which he wore were lying about in the room. So they started searching for the scientist. All of a sudden, Mrs. Hall heard a sniff close to her ear. A moment later, the hat on the bedpost leapt up and dashed itself into her face. Then the bedroom chair became alive. Springing into the air, it charged straight at her legs foremost. As she and her husband turned away in terror, the extraordinary chair pushed them both out of the room and then appeared to slam and lock the door after them. What happened next is, all of a sudden, Mrs. Hall, she could hear a sniff close to her ear. What is the meaning of sniff? Sniff means to breathe heavily. Sniff means to breathe heavily, alright? So, Mrs. Hall could hear someone sniffing, someone breathing heavily close to her ear. A moment later, the post of a bed jumped and struck into her face. The bedroom chair became alive. It started to move in the air, and it hurted her and legs first. As she and her husband, they tried to move away, the chair pushed both of them and locked the door before they could move out of the room. Mrs. Hall almost fell down the stairs in hysterics. Hysterics means what? Faint. She was almost fainted. She was convinced that the room was haunted by spirits and that the stranger had somehow caused this to enter into her furniture. Mrs. Hall, she was almost fainted. She thought that the room was full of spirits and scientists had made the spirits to enter the room and do this. Actually, we see that these are not the spirits doing such kind of strange things. Actually, it was the scientist who being invisible, was doing such kind of things. My poor mother used to sit up in that chair. She mourned to think it should rise up against me now. As the chair hit on Mrs. Hall's body and legs, she was shocked. What did she say? She said that these are the chairs in which my mother used to sit. My mother used to sit. How these chairs can be so cruel? How these chairs can hurt us? How this is possible? She started to moan. The feeling among the neighbors was that the trouble was caused by witchcraft. But witchcraft or not, the news of the burglary at the clergyman's home became known. The strange scientist was strongly suspected of having had a hand in it. Suspicion grew even stronger. Not long, suspicion grew even stronger when he suddenly produced some ready cash, though he had admitted not long before that he had no money. See, seeing this kind of thing, the strangers, they were in trouble, and they thought that these troubles are being caused by witchcraft. What is witchcraft? A person who practices magic or black magic. Witchcraft, see, witchcraft, W-I-T-C-H-C-R-A-F-T. Witchcraft means a person who practices magic. A person who practices magic, or you can say black magic, or a person who practices black magic. So these are the things, these are the troubles that are caused by witchcraft or not. But whether witchcraft or not, they were discussing at that time the burglary, the breaking into the house of the clergyman came, and the strange scientist was strongly in suspicion. He was suspected that surely the scientist had a hand in that burglary. Suspicion grew even stronger and stronger day by day, because a few moments earlier, Griffin admitted that he had no money. Now, how could he produce ready cash? So, suspicion grew stronger and stronger day by day. The village constable was secretly sent for. Instead of waiting for the constable, Mrs. Hall went up to the scientist, who had somehow mysteriously appeared from his. Mrs. Hall went to the scientist, who had somehow mysteriously appeared from his empty bedroom. Then, village constable, whose name is Mr. Jeffers, will come across this after some time. The village constable, he was secretly called in. He was called in for what? For investigation, to investigate the matter. Mrs. Hall, she had no patience to wait for the village constable to come. She escaped somehow from the bedroom, and she escaped somehow from bedroom, and she tried to know the matter. I want to know what you have been doing to my chairs upstairs, she demanded, and I want to know how it is you came out of an empty room and you entered a locked room. She made some question to whom? To the scientist. What are the questions? I wanted to know what you have been doing to my chair upstairs, she demanded. What were you doing with the chairs? The chairs which my mother used to sit are against me. What have you done? And second question, and I want to know how it is you came out of an empty room and how you entered a locked room. And the second question is how it was possible for him to come out of an empty room, and how could he enter a locked room? The room is locked. How can a person enter? How this is possible? Possible for Griffin because he could make himself invisible by swallowing that rare drug. Scientist was always quick-tempered. Now he became furious. You do not understand who or what I am, he shouted. Very well, I will show you. The Griffin, who if he wore clothes become visible, If he remove cloth, if he is naked, he is invisible. Alright. So the scientist was very quick tempered. Scientist lose his temper easily, and he became very angry. Why did he become very angry? Because there are some questions which are put to him. So he became very angry. What did he say then? He became very angry and he said that he will show Mrs. Hall who he is, and she will understand what he is. He answered that in a very angry mood, furious mood. Suddenly he threw off bandages, whiskers, spectacles and even nose. It took him only a minute to do this. The horrified people in the bar found themselves staring at a headless man. I told you if Griffin wore clothes, he is visible. If he doesn't wear cloth, if he removes clothes, if he is naked, he is invisible. So here you see, he threw off his bandages, whiskers, spectacles and even nose. These are the things which he wore after entering a theatrical store. So he removed all these. Removing all this, it took only a minute for him to do this. Removing all this, his head could not be seen. So the people were shocked, and they could see a person without a head, headless person means he was wearing short pant, all right, shoes, all right, but he removed the things which he wore on his face. Removing this, the upper part became invisible and he could be seen as a headless person. Mr. Jeffers, the constable, now arrived and was quite surprised to find that he had to arrest a man without a head. But Jeffers was not easily prevented from doing his duty. It was a magistrate's warrant ordered a people's arrest, that the person had to be arrested with or without his head. Mr. Jeffers, Mr. J-A-F-F-E-R-S Jeffers, he was the constable. Who was the constable? Mr. Jeffers, J-A-F-F-E-R-S, Mr. Jeffers. He was the constable. Alright, he was the constable. He now arrived and he was quite surprised to see that he had to arrest a headless person, a person without a head. But this is the magistrate order, this is the magistrate warrant that the constable, Mr. Jeffers, had to arrest that person. Whether the person is a headless or not, there is a different issue, but he had to arrest that headless person. Alright, there followed a remarkable scene as the policeman tried to get hold of a man who was becoming more and more invisible as he threw off one garment after another. Finally, a shot flew into the air and the constable found himself struggling with someone he could see at all. Some people tried to help him but found themselves hit by blows that seemed to come from nowhere. See, interesting here. A remarkable scene happened here. What was the remarkable scene? The policeman, he tried to the constable who came to arrest the scientist, he could not actually, because slowly and gradually the person was becoming invisible. Slowly and gradually he was removing his clothes one after another. If he removes clothes, he becomes invisible. So he threw off his shirt in the yard, and the constable, he could not see the person. Some people tried to help the constable to catch the Griffin, but they were hit by blows. They could not see Griffin, but Griffin could see them and blow them. And he was, the people who tried to help Griffin, they were hit by blows, and those blows seemed to come from nowhere, because Griffin was invisible. Being invisible, he was hitting them. They did not see him. So this happened. In the end, Jeffers was knocked unconscious as he made a last attempt to hold on to the unseen scientist. So in the end, what happened? Mrs. Jeffers became unconscious. He was hit by blow. His last attempt became failure, and he became unconscious. That is, he became senseless. So the Griffin was not caught. We see here. There were nervous, excited cries of hold him, but this was easier said than done. Griffin had shaken himself free, and no one knew where to lay hands on him. So in the last part, we see there were excited There are excited, nervous shouts of hold him, to hold whom? To hold Griffin or to catch Griffin. But this was something very easier to say than to do, because it was very tough to catch Griffin because he was invisible. But it was easier to say than to do the work, than to catch him. Griffin at last could make himself free, becoming completely invisible and escaping from being caught from the constable and other people. And now people are confused what to do and whom to catch, how to do, and people were confused. And Griffin was successful in escaping from the hands of the policeman, plus the other people who tried to hold Griffin or catch Griffin. See, here I come to the end of the story. Hope you liked the poem. Hope you liked the story. Hope you understood. It's a very easy story. So here we conclude the story. At the end we see Griffin was successful. Being invisible, he escaped from being caught. No one could catch him. He was successful. So what are the lessons? What are the morals we have come from this story? We could say that a scientist may be a brilliant. That is good. Brilliant scientists are rather good for the society. But being a lawless person, he misused the power of science. He misused his theory, and so he is a threat to the society. Alright, so this is a moral, we can say, which we discovered, which we found from this story. Alright, so I conclude the explanation here. Students, if you have any confusion, if you have any queries, you have my number. Please text me, WhatsApp me, and I will try to solve your problems. Thank you very much.